Imagine stepping into a secret garden where every bloom tells a story. A vibrant, charming cottage garden buzzing with life that started with nothing more than a tiny seed. Today, we're uncovering the magic behind these enchanting annuals and how you can transform your backyard into a dream sanctuary. Hi, I'm Anna Fable, and welcome to our cottage garden. I'm so happy to have you here. Please like this video if you like, and subscribe if you're not already. It really does help us out. All of the plants on this list are going to be great for your garden, whether you're a novice or a seasoned gardener. So let's jump right in with Bachelor buttons. These are beautiful, typically blue flowers. They sit beautifully in a cottage garden. One of the fantastic things about Bachelor's button is that it's very rare in the garden to find true blue flowers. And the florist's blue, which is a variety of Bachelor button that I like to start from seed, is so beautiful. And it really is that true blue. These are also known as cornflowers. They have very magical kind of buds that almost look like dragon's eggs. Another name for them is centaurea, and there are annual centaureas and there's also perennials. We have a few perennials in our garden. Now, one of my favorite varieties is the choice mix. This one actually has all of the colors that sit perfectly within my specific cottage garden because they're those softer pastel colors, blues, soft pinks, soft purples, some creamy whites. And so that's a really great mix, the choice mix, to kind of begin if you have a similar color palette to mine in our little cottage garden around the cottage itself. Then, like I said, there's florist blue. That's another great option. And I think you can get all of these from Johnny Seeds, or Eden is usually where I get my seeds from. And then you have classic magic, which is sort of a mauve and ivory mix. Really, really neat. There are also some really dark kind of purple ones that really pop in the garden. They kind of create, if you juxtapose those maybe with some soft dusty pinks and then pops of a really dark, almost black mauve color, that contrast is really beautiful, and it's an interesting one in the garden as well. Next up we have sunflowers, and I particularly love the green and white varieties. Might sound sort of strange to have a green variety, but I'll talk about those in a minute. The ones that I think are really fantastic for sort of the back of the border or along a nice white picket fence are those really happy looking faces with the white petals on the outside. And so there's one variety, it's called Pro Cut White Light, and that one has a white face and white petals. It's very, very beautiful, big, happy face. And then the other one is White Night, and that one has the white petals and then a dark face. But if you have sort of softer color palette like I do in my cottage garden, then having those white, soft, sunflowers can be a really beautiful touch to the garden. And also strawberry blonde. That's another variety that's really beautiful. It's sort of kissed with a little bit of that sort of dusty pink, a blush of pink on it. Very beautiful sunflower if you don't have those kind of bright, vibrant borders. And so now on to the green varieties. So Sunfill Purple and Sunfill Green. The sepals on those, these green sepals kind of cover the face of the flower, and so they have this very unique, very interesting look in the garden. And so if you're wanting something that has a little bit of bulk to it, but that it's not got that traditional sunflower look, it's a really interesting one to put in the border to kind of bulk out a space, especially if you have maybe shrubs that are on their first or second year, they haven't really bulked up yet, filled out a space. These would be a great one to kind of fill in. Another one that I didn't include on this list would be Tithonia. This is a Mexican sunflower. They get really, really large, and they can really fill up a border. They can get upward of 7 feet tall. So that's another great one, but they do have these little bright orange flowers. And sunflowers are fantastic because, they attract all kinds of wildlife into the garden. Same with Bachelor buttons, Bachelor buttons attract bumblebees and butterflies and all kinds of pollinators and insects into your garden. And then the sunflowers are going to attract similarly, like a lot of pollinators and things, but they're also going to attract all of the birds. So if you really struggle with a certain pest in your garden, particularly something a little bit bigger, maybe you have grasshoppers or katydids that are kind of munching your plants, we definitely do, then having, encouraging birds into your garden is a great way to kind of fight those off. So if you have your sunflowers, maybe maybe you leave a few up in the winter time, the birds are going to thank you for that. They're just going to go to town on those sunflower seeds. And then, you can provide little bird boxes to encourage them to stay, and then hopefully they'll help you with your pests. So an all-around great cottage garden plant, because you can harvest the flowers for a beautiful vase. You can use this, harvest the seeds. You can leave the seeds up for wildlife. It's just a great cottage garden plant. And there's another one, I think it's called Sunrich Gold. And that one is just such a beautiful kind of traditional cottage garden plant to me. It just looks like that traditional sunflower, very happy, very open, very broad, very big. Next up, we have borage. Borage is a great cottage garden plant because it has these beautiful small blue blooms, another true blue one in the garden. I guess it's more of a periwinkle, but it definitely has a blue look to it. But it sits so beautifully in a cottage garden because it is edible. So it's got this sort of whisper of a watermelon flavor to it, or maybe a little bit like a cucumber too, the flowers. And so they're really gorgeous. They have this sort of star-shaped periwinkle bloom. And then in the center, there's this sort of white and black pointy part that just looks so exotic and interesting and beautiful. But they're so small that on the plant it just looks like little freckles on a smiling, fuzzy, blue-green plant. And those flowers are great to kind of garnish drinks if you have a sparkling watermelon beverage and you just put a few of the borage flowers in there. That's the way to do it. So I think I will make another video about just all of the herbs and all of the edibles that you can put in your garden and grow from seed very easily. Things like, all of your vegetables, your fruits, your herbs. I think in terms of herbs, so many of our herbs have beautiful flowers. If you let them go to seed, beautiful flowers that the pollinators love. I found that in one of my gardens when I lived in Northern California, the pollinators would just go crazy over the little herb pots that I would let go to seed. And so we would have mint flowers, dill flowers. Dill is one of my favorite herbs. And the flowers on dill are beautiful and the pollinators just go crazy for them. Cilantro and parsley as well. The fennel flowers, they are gorgeous in a cottage garden. They get very, very tall. You can get them in all different colors. There's this sort of burgundy colored fennel that you can have in your garden where the wispy foliage is burgundy instead of that true emerald green. Very, very beautiful one as well. So if you did want me to create a video about edible, things to add to your garden that are still ornamental looking, they kind of blend those two together and they're in the center of that Venn diagram of beauty and being edible, then let me know because I'd love to do a video like that as well. But basil is another one I just wanted to touch on because the flowers from basil are really beautiful. They come up in little white flowers on stalks and very, very beautiful little white spires of flowers. And you can pick them off and they have a similar basil taste, a little bit stronger, but you can kind of sprinkle those on pasta the same way you would Parmesan. I like doing that and it's a really nice little flavor. But borage does spread pretty aggressively, so just be mindful of that whenever you plant it in your garden. And next up we have two very popular cottage garden plants. These are sort of quintessential cottage garden plants that I had to include on the list, but I'm grouping them together because we're going to go through them pretty quickly. Very likely you've heard of them, zinnias and cosmos. Now, cosmos for me are sort of like the quintessential cottage garden annual. They look like the flowers that you would draw when you were a kid. If someone said draw a flower, it kind of is, you're drawing a cosmo kind of. They are just so beautifully, they perform so well. I have a lot of experience with the ones that are very, very common, things like the Versailles mix and Sensation. Sensation is a little bit taller, Versailles stays a little bit shorter. It's kind of really good for pots. But those are sort of darker fuchsias and pinks and whites, really beautiful mix for a cottage garden. And I think it can, that mix can actually sit really well if you have like really warm colors or if you have sort of a softer color palette to just do little punctuations and pops of color. And I think probably my favorite Cosmo is the afternoon white. I just love the shape and structure of that. It just looks so cottagey to me. It's very, very sweet, white flower, just, yeah, great performer. Another one is the Sensation Picotee. I grew that last year and I was so happy to see them. They just really stand out in the garden because they have this picotee, this rim, they're purple and white, and they just kind of glow because of that combination and the juxtaposition of those two colors. That's another really, really beautiful one if you can get your hands on it. And apricot lemonade. I grew this one in our kitchen garden and it almost has an iridescent look to it. It's so cool, that flower. It's peachy, yellowy, orangey, but all on the same flower, kind of moving from peach to apricot, orange, yellow, and then almost it has a purple kind of sheen to it, look to it. So it looks iridescent. But that's a really beautiful one if you can get your hands on it. Not as common, but a very, very fun one to start from seed. And there are a few more plants on this list that also have that kind of iridescent quality to them. So I'll get onto that in just a moment. But the next thing I want to talk about is zinnias. Another very common one. Both zinnias and cosmos are so easy to start from seed. They germinate very quickly. They're very reliable. And zinnias are just beautiful. They're little landing pads for the hummingbirds and the butterflies. And they're great for a butterfly garden or something like that if you're planting that this year. Just a beautiful, beautiful, very reliable plant. I love the little ring, the crown of flowers around the center. I love how the petals are so stiff, so they really last in a vase for a long time. And some of the varieties that I love are the Queen series. I think it's called Queenie now series, which is sort of a little bit of a dusty look to it. And the one that I particularly like is the Queenie Lime with Blush, I believe it's called. And that one, it comes up in all different sort of shapes and sizes of a green flower with just a blush of pink on it. And it's really, really nice. It kind of looks vintage. It kind of looks a little bit antique in the garden, as do a few other of the ones on this list. They have that kind of vintage look to it, which sits really peacefully in a cottage garden, because it just kind of is that call back to the origins of the cottage garden when it looks a little bit ancient. And State Fair is a very, very common one, but such a doer, so bright, so fun to have all of those colors. If you have a spot in your garden where you entertain a lot, they're going to be blooming throughout the entire year. So they're cut and come again. Same with Cosmos, same with so many of the ones I have on the list. So just be aware that, if you have this place in mind that you just want to feel very festive, very happy, planting a bunch of State Fair zinnias or California giant zinnias are another one that you could plant in that space, and they'll just be throwing out blooms the whole season long. Next up, we have cerinthe. Now these are sort of purple, bell-shaped, honey-scented flowers. They have a glaucous blue-green foliage, and so you could grow them in an area where maybe your perennials or your shrubs aren't in their third year yet. They haven't fully established that they're on the smaller side, just to fill in certain areas with that blue-green foliage, which can sometimes be hard to find for sun-loving plants. Whereas you have things like hostas and brunneras and lots of things that love the shade that have that glaucous foliage. But this is an example of one that does really well in the sun for us. And those beautiful bell-shaped flowers have that same iridescent look to them that I was talking about with the apricot lemonade cosmo. Really unique. I planted them sort of on our hillside so that I could look up at the little bells because they turn down. And I'm so glad that I did that. The second they started blooming, I got so excited, just crawling into the back of the border and just staring at them. They're really, really unique, very interesting. I love the foliage on them. It's sort of a eucalyptus kind of color and just, yeah, very unique. I would highly recommend cerinthe if you haven't done those yet. And they're very easy to start from seed. Again, a larger seed. And so those are a great one for a cottage garden. Next up, we have Celosia and amaranth. I'm combining these two together because they have a very similar kind of bloom structure. Celosias tend to stay a little bit smaller and amaranth can get really, really tall, but they have really beautiful flowers that are fantastic for using in cut flowers and using to dry them and use them in wreaths. If you wanted to kind of plan your garden so that you're growing flowers to use for your maybe holiday wreath, then you could choose specific varieties. Like for amaranth, the emerald tassel and the love lies bleeding seeds are so beautiful. The emerald tassel, like the name would suggest, they're just these tassels, these weeping flowers. They dry so easily and so beautifully. They keep most of their color. There's also a coral tassel that's really beautiful as well. And I use these kind of emerald tassel. The love lies bleeding is a darker kind of red, mauvey red color. And I used those in our Christmas decorations. When we did our foraged Christmas tree, I kind of put those throughout, looking like just little spirals of dried flower. And then I did on our mantelpiece, when we decorated our whole mantelpiece with the tree coming out of it, I put some of those emerald tassels and things on that as well. And I think it gave it this, it kind of looked a little bit like tinsel on the tree. It was very charming. So if you want to have a little cut flower space for flowers that do really well in dried applications, then I would definitely suggest using those varieties and choosing the ones that you're going to want to use in those kinds of winter or Christmas or holiday arrangements. In terms of Celosia, again, I've grown smaller varieties of Celosia. I know they can get a little bit taller as well, but some of my favorite varieties for the cottage garden are the flamingo feather, which is sort of a pink one that's very upright. The little fronds on those are sort of similar to dried grasses, and that they have that kind of dried sort of appearance in the garden. They don't look dry, but they are more similar to kind of a seed head look. But they almost look like coral. They're just a very interesting plant, kind of hard to describe, but very beautiful. And then in terms of bright, vibrant colors, I put the pampas plume variety in our kitchen garden, and that was all different colors and shapes and textures, and they almost look like flames, I'd say. Celosia kind of, a lot of the varieties, look, the ones I'm talking about here specifically, the flamingo feather and the pampas plume, they sort of look like upright flames. So they're very upright, whereas some of the amaranth, comes down like the Love Lies Bleeding comes down like that. These ones are very upright in nature, and so that juxtaposition can be really, really pretty. They're great to, use in a wreath if you wanted to do something like the flamingo feather. In an Easter or spring wreath, something like that, that could be really beautiful. I would also suggest that you cut these, if you're going to use them in a dried application, cut them a little bit earlier. So right when they start to come out, then they'll hold that color longer, and then they won't go to seed and get seeds all over the place, because they do seed very, very freely. Another variety of amaranth that's great, because they do have the kind of upright habits in the amaranth as well, is red spike. And as the name would suggest, it's just these red spikes that kind of pop up like that. It's a deep burgundy red. You could almost say it's on the mauve fuchsia side of things, but it's very bright. It's a bright, bright color. Very, very beautiful. And you can cut the entire stalk of an amaranth, which can get, like I said, very, very tall, 7 feet tall. And you can cut those and use those in holiday arrangements or any arrangements that you'd like as well. Just a beautiful plant, great for a cottage border. If you wanted to pop those in the back of a border, that could be really pretty, or along the bends in a path to kind of create interest as you walk through. Those are great varieties. Next up, we have Phacelia, another fantastic cottage garden plant. They are these sort of magical furling florets of periwinkle flowers. If you see these little swirls of purple flowers, they just look whimsical and magical, and they really add to the cottage garden because they are such an amazing pollinator attractor. They're really nectar rich, so the pollinators love them, and they're just always buzzing with life, and a really beautiful color for the garden as well. Now, nigella and aquilegia or columbine are also fantastic garden plants to grow from seed. We struggle with nigella in our garden, so I'm not going to touch on this too much, but the Delft blue variety, which is kind of like a deep purple and creamy white, and the love in a mist, those are just they're such beautiful flowers, very unique, very interesting. And if you can sow flowers in your garden, direct sow them, then I would suggest doing that with nigella. They don't love being transplanted. And the way that I like to do this whenever I'm direct sowing anything is just create a pattern. So a lot of people just do lines as you're sowing the seeds in lines in your borders, or you can do circles, or you can do what I like to do is X's. I like to do X's because then it looks more full as you're looking at it straight on. But the reason you do this in these different patterns when you're sowing your seeds is if you just scattered them, you would have no idea which is a weed and which is a seed as it starts to come up. So this way, when you see a pattern forming, you can just weed anything that's not creating that pattern, knowing that you're not going to be digging up any of your seeds. So those are great. They're easy to grow, and if you keep the soil moist, it'll be really easy to grow them. Next up, we have flax, and this is one that's actually really easy to just sow straight into your garden. Flax is often used in sort of wildflower mixes, and this one is really great because it can handle shade as well. A lot of the ones on this list can actually handle more shade than you'd think. I have my borage which was the second one on our list. I have that one planted in a very shady bed, and it has just come back year after year. It's been self-seeding. It's so happy there. We get so many flowers. So a lot of these can actually handle a lot of shade. Columbines and nigella are going to do well in the shade as well. But flax can do really well in a shady border. So the two varieties that I like are the annual blue, I think it's called, and then the scarlet flax. Scarlet is very, very bright, and it almost has a dark black margin to it. So it really pops. Like, that color is just very, very, it pops. And I had this planted in our Northern California garden in a little area that was tucked in the back that I planted a little wildflower meadow back there. It was pretty shady, and the flax came up beautifully. I had some sort of stepping stones back there. It was just behind my neighbor's greenhouse, and I just kind of tucked a little wildflower meadow back there. But it is really, really beautiful. Another really easy one to start from seed. So scatter that in little X's in an area, and it'll come up beautifully for you. The next cottage garden plant to start from seed is Strawflower, a fantastic annual that's great for drying. Using these in dried arrangements is fantastic. They're often used in these ornamental kind of balls that you can hang from the ceiling, almost like dried disco balls. They're very, very beautiful. And unlike the amaranth and the celosia, these Strawflowers, especially if you cut them at the right time, they kind of maintain sort of a glossy look. So while celosia can look a little bit dry, these ones can stay looking healthy and alive if you cut them at the right time particularly. So right as they start to open, if you cut those then and then hang them upside down to dry, they are just really, really unique. The sound of the petals when they're dried, even when they're, when they're on the plant, when they're alive, oh my gosh, it's such a soothing, relaxing sound. Very crispy kind of leaves, like old parchment. They're really, really interesting. I've grown the vintage white, and I think red purple is the other variety, because I wanted to grow varieties specifically that I could use in my Christmas decorations. And I use them beautifully in both the tree and on the mantelpiece and things like that. They're just very, very pretty. A lot of these things, don't do very well in our garden because we just have kind of difficult garden growing conditions, a lot of shade, but they bloom really late for us in the season. But I know for most people, they start blooming and they'll just bloom for a lot of the season. So that's a great one to have, particularly if you really love, if you leave them up, they look really beautiful as just flowers in the garden. But using them for cutting as well is another sort of bonus, double thing there. And you can use them as just your, summer wreath even. You don't have to wait until Christmas. Another variety that I grew from seed was a sort of peachy apricot one. It might have been vintage apricot. And yeah, as the name would suggest, very beautiful sort of peachy color, really, really pretty. If you wanted to add that to a nice wreath, I think that would look really nice if you had some dried eucalyptus or something like that was that glaucous foliage, because that peachy color mixed with that blue-green is like a match made in heaven. So Strawflowers are just fantastic. And what is a cottage garden without butterflies? So next up we have butterfly weed. The swamp milkweed is the variety that I'm most familiar with. Very, very beautiful. These ones are not hard to start from seed, but there's a bit of a process to it. They need a vernalization period, they need a stratification period, so you just need to make sure that you are freezing them and following the directions on the seed packet. I like to just put them in a damp towel and then put them in the freezer for some time and then plant them out. Sow them into little seed trays that I can directly plant into the garden. So something that's biodegradable. They have those little kind of recyclable, little cardboard looking seed starting trays. Those ones are fantastic for this because you can just kind of cut a hole or a little X at the bottom, cut the actual cell out, and just plop that straight into your hole in the ground. The soulmate variety is really, really beautiful, and the swamp milkweed has these umbels of purple flower typically. They're sort of like a pinky purple color. I really love these flowers. I love umbellifers. I think that these, like I said earlier, the landing pads for butterflies that the zinnias create, this is exactly what they love. They love those large pads that they can kind of land on and just get nectar from each of the flowers. They're very beautiful. The butterflies love them, the bumblebees love them, and they're just a fantastic one. They're one of the only plants, or if not the only plant, where monarchs lay their eggs, so they're a really helpful plant to have in the garden as well. So it's just perfect cottage garden plants. And now on to some climbers. Sweet peas are one of my favorite flowers. They remind me so much of my grandmother. She used to have sweet peas every single year, and one of my chores was to go and cut all the sweet peas so that they didn't go to seed. If you let your sweet peas go to seed, then they will the whole plant will kind of start to die a little bit sooner, and they won't push any more blooms. But if you keep deadheading them, if you keep just cutting the fresh flowers, they'll stay in the vase for quite a bit of time. You know, you can get about a week out of your sweet peas. They smell incredible. Putting them in a small room like a bathroom is just an amazing way to do it. Better than any artificial scent you could do or a candle. They are just amazing. The flowers themselves, they're in the pea family, so they have that beautiful shape to them, almost like miniature orchids. Just gorgeous flowers. The scent is unlike anything else in the garden. It's such a specific scent, sweet peas. It's just so nostalgic for me. I love climbers of any kind. I think they're so whimsical. And sweet peas are really easy to grow. Large pea-shaped seed. And the thing with sweet peas is that they're poisonous. Like a few things on this list, they're poisonous. And so just be mindful of that. They also don't love to have their roots disturbed. So planting them, you might have seen trays that have a deeper root run. So that's going to be a great one for a sweet pea. I like planting them into containers that are either recyclable or containers that I can just kind of very easily cut the outside. I like to use recycled things when I'm planting my seeds anyway. So I'll use, old almond milk containers or mushroom containers or things like that for, just to recycle those. And so if you can use something that you can just sort of cut along the outside and then plant that directly into the ground, that's great. They like rich, moist soil. So I like to add a lot of compost around the sweet peas. Again, sadly, they don't love our garden. They just really struggle in our area in particular. We've talked to people who have had a hard time growing sweet peas as well, other professional gardeners. And so it's kind of a bummer, but they are really beautiful plants and they grow really well in most places. Some of my favorite varieties are the Old Spice mix. That's a beautiful mix. The Hyacinth, oh my gosh, that one is sort of a creamy white with a little bit of a purple on the outside. Very beautiful. And as the name would suggest, Hyacinth. Lovely scent on that one. Really has a nice sillage. It spreads really beautifully through the air. And so on a summer night, if you have an area in your garden where you like to go maybe after dinner to sort of sit and chat with a little beverage, then having maybe a pergola or a little arch that has these high-scent sweet peas growing up, maybe the columns or something, that's so nice because of that white and purple. Those are white is the last color that we see in the garden as the sun is setting. And so those are wonderful for an evening garden. If you have a little fire pit and you have some of that, that would be a very romantic setting. Could have that combined with maybe a jasmine, some gardenias, you'd be in like scent heaven. It might be overwhelming. But yeah, that's a great one. Hyacinth is beautiful. And they have so many wonderful mixes and they are really easy to start. You can also direct sow them along whatever structure you're going to be growing them up, but they're really beautiful. Midnight is a beautiful burgundy colored sweet pea. That's great for just adding that kind of contrast and interesting color and depth into a border. And then Enchanté is a variety I really want to try. Each flower is sort of tricolor. So they open out in this sort of soft mustardy yellow color. And then each of the tops and bottoms are sort of a periwinkle mixed with a soft pink. Really interesting. Enchanté is that one. So maybe we can grow that together and see how that one turns out. Next we have Morning Glory, and my favorite variety is Heavenly Blue. Beautiful leaves. They are such aggressive growers. So they're really going to cover a structure or a wall or maybe a roof of one of your sheds that you want to kind of hide. They're great for, I was talking about this in our hacks video, kind of growing that up if you have a rose that hasn't fully established yet, growing Morning Glory up that to just fill in the gap as your rose or your clematis or your climber is starting to establish over the first, 2 to 5 years. That's a wonderful way of doing it. And morning glory is beautiful. Heavenly blue just has these giant trumpets of blue flower. So beautiful, little white, gentle white stripes along the trumpets. And the leaves are just so big and emerald green. They are little heart-shaped leaves. They look so healthy. They just make your garden look healthy. Unlike the sweet pea, they don't start to die back once they are flowering. They just keep on going until you get a frost. So that's a real benefit of it. It's just a big, reliable green structure and really, really nice. They do want to stay on the wet side. And I think if you're in a really hot climate, you especially want to make sure that their feet are nice and wet. But that's another beautiful one. Heavenly blue morning glory. And then hyacinth bean, ruby moon hyacinth bean. This is a great one, very interesting. I feel like Joanna Gaines has this in her kitchen garden, but really beautiful. If you want a climber that looks a little bit different, has a little bit of a different structure to it, that's fantastic. And obviously, like I said before, you can grow all kinds of edibles. I love growing peas up. There's actually a pea called magnolia that's an edible pea. Just don't mix it with your sweet peas because you don't want to be picking the sweet peas, which are poisonous. So don't ever put an edible pea on the same trellis as a sweet pea, okay? Because the sweet pea pods are poisonous. So just be really mindful of that. But if you do have a tripod that you want to put, grow this magnolia is a purple and pink bicolor. Each flower has purple and pink on it, purple on the top, pink on the bottom, and they are so gorgeous. And the peas are really, really nice. They grow really, really tall, beautiful. So I really love that one. You could grow all different kinds of edible beans, but I know we're probably going to do a video that's all about the edible edible plants that you can have and grow very easily in your cottage garden. But those are a few ideas as well. But the hyacinth bean is a great ornamental. And then last we have nasturtiums. Now nasturtiums aren't, just a climber. They can really bulk out an area. They can be a beautiful ground cover. They're a spiller as well, so they can spill out of a pot. They're really multi-purpose and multifunctional. So if you have a spot that you don't really know what to do with, try adding a few, maybe a little cluster of 3 nasturtium seeds. They are so easy to start from seed. You just plunk them in the ground. Every garden I've ever lived in it's been easy to grow nasturtiums. Kids love, it's a great one to grow with kids because the seeds are big, like I said, so it's easy for them to manage. So maybe you have your kids or your grandkids or your nephews or nieces or cousins or neighbors coming over who have little kids. To have them help you plant that seed. They germinate pretty quickly and the leaves come up in the little lily pad leaves of nasturtiums. Is one of the reasons I love to grow them. I love how they look in the garden. They are so magical. They just remind me of Thumbelina for some reason. They're so beautiful. I love the leaves on nasturtiums. I've put them in my cottage garden, which again is those softer colors, and I use the variety Peach Melba. There are some really beautiful soft white varieties of nasturtium as well that you can get your hands on that are really beautiful if you have those softer kind of pastel colors. But then obviously the most kind of popular ones are the oranges and the reds and the yellows, and we have those growing in our vegetable patch. And we use them for companion planting and things like that, but we love to have the Empress of India in our vegetable patch because that rich red color is just gorgeous. But they will take over a structure. If you plant them up a fence or near a tripod, they will completely climb it. They completely took over our tripods. We do our stakes from twigs and branches, and for our peas because the tendrils like to climb up those little branches. So we do that, and then we planted nasturtiums in all 4 corners of the beds in the kitchen garden. And by the end of the season, the sweet peas had started to die, and already the nasturtiums had taken over the structure. So it ended up continuing to look green throughout the year, and we didn't have to pull the sweet peas out, which was nice because also legumes are great for the soil. But yeah, like I said, the Empress of India variety, very rich red color, very saturated, very beautiful, and the Peach Melba are the two of my favorite varieties for those. And the entire plant is edible, from the flowers all the way to the leaves. They're edible. So that's really fun to add to a little salad, garnish a salad or a pasta dish with those. They have kind of a peppery flavor to them. Very beautiful. I've even added them onto a cake. I did a big cake and I put them on almost like a crown on the top of the cake. And then I wanted to share my favorite biennials to grow from seed. Some of the most famous cottage garden plants are biennials. Hollyhocks and Foxgloves. So hollyhocks are just a fantastic one to add height to a cottage garden, especially again if you're waiting for your other plants, your bigger plants like your perennials or your shrubs or even your trees to really establish and grow and bulk up. Putting something like hollyhocks around them or in that area is a great way of just filling up the garden space with something beautiful and interesting. They have these spires of very cottagey flowers going all the way up. They're sort of like heralds of midsummer. I really love them. They're so easy to grow from seed. I had no idea how easy they were to grow from seed. They grow so big, so quickly. They transfer so well. There are varieties that you can get that will bloom the first year, which is what we got this past year. Champagne majorette, champagne double, something like that. It's a sort of peachy, bubbling champagne look with just these frothy double flowers going all the way up like bubbles in a champagne glass. Gorgeous flower. Oh my gosh, we planted a whole bed of those. And I mean, we planted all of those in one bed. There were a lot of other things flowering at the same time. But that one is so gorgeous. The Indian spring mix is a great one. Having those kind of peeking above a white picket fence is such a cottage garden look. In the back of a border. Yeah, they're just really, really interesting, beautiful plants. The deer will leave them alone. So I think we're really going to go heavy with those on the outside of our deer fence this year, just to see how they do and how they look and all of that. Now they can be a little bit susceptible, hollyhocks, to some pests and some diseases. So just be mindful of that. Maybe try doing some companion planting. Again, if you want me to do a video on companion planting, please do let me know down in the comments. And then we have foxgloves, the most quintessential cottage garden plant, in my opinion. They are just these spires of trumpet-shaped blooms. They're so pretty. I love them so, so much. Whenever I think about them, I just get excited. In that same bed that I was talking about where we had the champagne hollyhocks, we grew Dalmatian peach foxgloves and Camelot lavender. So we had this lavender and peach, and then we had the champagne color in the background. If you haven't done this combination, do this combination. Just do this combination for me. You know, each of the seed packs will probably cost you $12 to get all those. And then if you have some ferns, maybe a neighbor has some ferns, go dig up some ferns, put them in the same area. I know one of you has shared your foxglove and fern border, and I'm so excited. Thank you for that inspiration. I love all of your inspiring ideas because I'm doing that next year. I've now planned a whole area in my garden where I'm doing that, and I'm so excited about that. But that combination of the Dalmatian peach with the Camelot lavender, with the champagne majorette, double majorette, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but that hollyhock is just incredible. It's so beautiful because of the different heights and all of that. Really spectacular. The Camelot mix of foxgloves has the lavender in it. It doesn't have the peach, but it has the rose, which is a sort of a deeper pink, white, cream. They're just so, so pretty. They're a little bit smaller because these are all annual foxgloves, or they're still biennials, I suppose, but they bloom in the first year. Same with the hollyhocks. Hollyhocks and foxgloves are traditionally biennial, meaning they establish their roots in the first year and then they bear flowers the second year, but they've grown them in such a way, these varieties I'm talking about with the hollyhocks and foxgloves, that they bloom on the first year as well. So that's fun. But yeah, the Camelot mix is beautiful. There's grandiflora, which is a really beautiful yellow foxglove. It grows wild for us all over here, and it's all over our meadow and in our shadier spots. Really beautiful, soft yellow, interesting, really interesting shaped trumpet flower. Gorgeous. I love that one. And then there's the Gloxiniflora, which is one that you've probably seen, really common variety, but those get really tall. Those are, again, Grandiflora and Gloxiniflora are true biennials, establishing their roots the first year, then they have their flowers the second year. Really beautiful. Oh my gosh. And each of the flowers will produce thousands of seeds, so if you wait until they dry, then you can just cut them at the base. Wear gloves because foxgloves are poisonous as well, and just kind of shake them into a border that you want them to spread. If you want to, spread your foxglove seeds, and they will continue to pop up in those spaces really, really well. Kind of no matter what kind of area you're looking at, you're going to continue to have foxgloves, which is really nice if that's the look you're going for. But foxgloves are just so beautiful. I love the intricacy on the individual flowers, how they have these little kind of freckles on the bottom part of they look like little mouths, kind of like little whale mouths or something, but they have these little freckles on the inside. I love watching the bumblebees like scooch in there, and their little legs kind of kicking in the back is one of my favorite things to watch. We have foxgloves all around the area where we sit and have our lunches and tea and things like that in our garden. And so having the foxgloves right there where the bumblebees just come straight up and land is such a neat thing to have in the garden. But foxgloves, they're just so magical. Very magical flowers. They're very fun to grow. I have a lot of love for foxgloves, and I think the foliage itself is really beautiful as well. Again, a glaucous kind of leaf, very fuzzy and beautiful. Everything is poisonous, so just be mindful when you're touching it though. Another very quintessential cottage garden plant is snapdragons, and there are some beautiful varieties that you can grow from seed that will set the first year and then bloom the second year. You can get some that will bloom the first year as well, but snapdragons are gorgeous. I mean, how whimsical and magical that you can just pop their little cheeks and they start to talk. They are just so beautiful. I love how the bumblebees land on the bottom lip of the snapdragons, snap them open and scurry inside. They are just really, really magical. I love the spires of flower, very ruffly, very interesting looking flowers, and they're geotropic. So if they blow down in a windstorm or they're not staked or whatever, they'll kind of grow along their sides and then sort of snake their way up. And so then if you cut them, then you can have really interesting kind of shapes in your vase if you're using them for cut flowers. Really, really pretty. And they provide those kind of tall spires of flower as well. Some of my favorite varieties of snapdragon are the Potomac lavender, the Madam butterfly, particularly the ivory. There's also apple blossom, which is beautiful, but I really like the lavender colored snapdragon. I think that color is really, really beautiful with that shape of flower. And they're full of whimsy. They're such whimsical flowers. And our last one is another biennial, and it is Ammi. So this is the Daucus, and you can have, these are also called false Queen Anne's lace. And the two varieties that I love are Green Mist and Dara. And I think those varieties go really well together as well. Very easy to grow from seed. It does take a full year, from my experience, for them to really establish and then to start to bloom. But we have an area in our garden where we have the Green Mist and the Dara, which is sort of pink to mauve, all in a very dusty, antique look. So if you have that next to maybe your vintage white Strawflowers and some of the sort of dustier colors, it can really look very vintage and antique. And if you have an antique kind of mirror up against a wall, maybe with an old bird bath, something like that, if you're really embracing the whimsy of a cottage garden, that could look so nice together. The Green Mist is really beautiful. Again, a very enchanting look. And it's nice to have green flowers in a garden. It's a very unique look. In terms of zinnias, I forgot to mention, but some of the other green varieties of zinnias that don't turn that blush color, the zinnia flowers that are green are really interesting, especially if you want to plant things that are really contrasting or really bright next to those. It's a really cool look in the garden. Like a really bright dahlia next to a green zinnia is kind of a cool look. But Ammi just has this very ethereal charm. They're very frothy, this white, frothy kind of look to them. Not the two varieties that I mentioned, but I have a lot of Queen Anne's lace in my garden and I embrace it. I absolutely love it. I have it growing all around this one part of my cottage garden, and it's around a seating area, and I really love to sit there. I just feel like I'm in a sea of sea foam. I'm just surrounded by this foaming, frothing, beautiful white, buzzing with life because they're umbellifers. So all of the pollinators land on them and just go to town. The lightning bugs love them as well, which is really cool at night to see them just sort of hanging out. And when the lightning bugs come through the Ammi, they kind of light them up. So the little sea of white foaming flowers looks even brighter when you have the lightning bugs going off on them. Yeah, very, very magical. This is making me so nostalgic for summer. I'm so excited for the gardening season to start. But that is our list of my favorite cottage garden plants to start from seed. If you have any that I missed, please let me know down below. Maybe I'll do another video just kind of filling in the gaps of what we've talked about here, because there are so many that you could grow from seed, right? So please do let me know. Let me know if you have any requests for videos coming up. I have a lot of ideas, fun ideas for gardening content, and I can't wait to get my hands in the soil. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.